One email, that's all it took. While I was accepting the biggest award of my life, I discovered my boyfriend and best friend had stolen my skincare brand and my life's work. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's the story of how I took my power back. I never imagined the highest point of my life would feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. The lights in the Grand Ballroom of the Chicago Marriott were warm and golden, bathing everything in that perfect, almost cinematic glow. Hundreds of women filled the seats, powerful women, ambitious women, women who had fought their own battles to get here. And they were all on their feet, clapping as the host placed the heavy crystal Brand of the Year award into my hands. Lumina Skin, my baby. My 6-year war turned into victory. I stood there in my deep emerald dress, heart hammering against my ribs, and tried to steady my breathing. The applause rolled over me like waves. I looked down at the award, its sharp edges catching the light, and for a moment, I let myself feel it. The pride, the exhaustion, the unbelievable joy. 6 years ago, I was mixing ingredients at 2 in the morning in my tiny Lincoln Park kitchen, my hands raw from testing formulas on my own arms. I had cried more nights than I could count when batches failed, when my savings ran dry, when doubt whispered that I should just give up and get a normal job. But I didn't, because I had them. I lifted my eyes to the audience and smiled, my voice soft but clear as it carried through the microphone. Thank you, truly, from the deepest part of me. Lumina Skin didn't begin in a sleek laboratory with million-dollar equipment. It began in a cramped apartment kitchen with nothing but stubborn hope and late-night tears. And none of this would exist without 2 people who never let me fall. I turned slightly toward the front row. Dax Wilder, my partner, my creative director, the man who stayed up with me through every failed batch and every all-nighter. You saw the vision when it was still just messy notes on scrap paper. And Celine Hart, my best friend, my COO, the sister life gave me. You held my hand through the darkest months and celebrated every tiny win like it was the Super Bowl. The crowd cheered louder. Dax flashed that familiar, confident smile, the one that used to make my knees weak. Celine, elegant and radiant in her sleek black gown, pressed her hands to her heart and mouthed, "I love you." Her eyes glistened under the lights, looking every bit the loyal best friend the world had come to know. For one shining moment, everything felt complete. Perfect. I glanced down at my phone, still live streaming the speech to more than 40,000 viewers watching from home. I wanted to end on a high note, to thank every woman in the room for believing in clean beauty, for believing in second chances. That's when the email notification slid down from the top of the screen. From Marcus Hale, Hale & Cohn Retail Partners. Subject, Final Contract Confirmation, Eclipse Skin. My thumb moved before my brain could stop it. I tapped the email open, still smiling for the camera. The first line hit me like ice water poured straight into my veins. Dear Mr. Wilder and Miss Hart, we are excited to move forward with the exclusive nationwide rollout for Eclipse Skin, utilizing the 12 proprietary formulas developed under the Lumina Skin project. My smile didn't just fade, it died. The applause continued around me, but it sounded far away now, muffled, like I was underwater. My fingers tightened around the crystal award until the edges bit into my skin. The words on the screen burned behind my eyes. 12 proprietary formulas. Mine. The ones I had guarded like my own children. The ones I had never fully released outside our inner circle. The ones that carried every late night, every scar on my hands, every sacrifice I had made. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me. My knees felt unsteady beneath the long dress. For a terrifying second, I forgot how to breathe. The bright stage light suddenly felt blinding, exposing every crack I didn't know was there. How long had this been happening? Right under my roof, right under my trust. I forced my gaze back up to the audience. All those smiling faces, all that applause for a success story that now felt like it was built on quicksand. Dax was still looking at me with that easy confidence. Celine was still waving gently, her expression warm and supportive. But something inside me had already fractured. A quiet, devastating shift. The kind of break that doesn't make noise at first. It just leaves you hollow. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about the two people I had loved and trusted most in the world. And in that moment, standing under the brightest lights of my greatest achievement, I realized I might have been the very last one to see the truth. This is the story of how everything I built was stolen from within, and how I found the strength to look betrayal in the eye and choose myself anyway. Because the deepest wounds don't always come from enemies. Sometimes they come from the people you would have died for. That night, after the applause finally died down and the last camera lights faded, I drove home in silence. The Crystal Award sat heavy on the passenger seat beside me, but it no longer felt like a victory. It felt like a question I was terrified to answer. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen island, the same one where Lumina Skin was born, and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking as I started digging through old files, contracts, and shared drives. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be some reasonable explanation. Dax and Celine were my family. They had been with me through everything. But the deeper I looked, the colder the truth became. By 3 a.m., and I had found it all. A separate LLC registered 8 months ago under the name Eclipse Skin LLC. Both Dax and Celine listed as co-founders. 12 formulas, every single one of them mine, transferred over with clean documentation. And the worst part, a signed exclusive distribution contract with Hale & Company, the largest beauty retail chain in the Midwest, dated just 3 weeks earlier. They had taken everything I created and sold it as their own. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen until my eyes burned. Tears slipped down my cheeks, hot and silent. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned, carefully, quietly, while I was still calling them my partner and my best friend. The next few days passed in a haze of quiet horror. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way Dax would suddenly close his laptop when I walked into the room, the hushed phone calls Celine took in the hallway, the little comments around the office. Nova's been so busy lately, maybe she's losing her touch. I even heard one employee whisper that I had borrowed ideas from the team. Now I understood where those rumors had come from. They weren't just stealing my work, they were preparing to erase me. I didn't cry in front of anyone. Not yet. I kept showing up at the office, smiling through meetings, pretending everything was fine. But inside, something was breaking slowly, piece by piece. On the fourth night, I couldn't hold it anymore. I asked them both to meet me at the Lumina Skin office after hours, just the three of us. The building was dark and quiet when they arrived. Only the emergency lights glowed softly in the hallway. I waited for them in the large conference room, the same room where we had celebrated hitting our first million in sales. Dax walked in first, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. Celine followed, her face already pale, eyes red like she had been crying on the way over. I didn't waste time. I turned my laptop toward them and opened the files. "Explain this," I said, my voice low and steady, though my hands were trembling beneath the table. Dax leaned forward, scanned the screen, and let out a long breath. He didn't look shocked. He looked tired, like this conversation was an inconvenience. "Nova, listen, it's not what you think," he began, using that calm, reasonable tone he always used when he wanted me to see things his way. "We did this for the brand, for all of us. Hale and Condi wanted a fresh name, a cleaner story. They were hesitant to tie everything to just one founder. We were protecting the future." "Protecting?" I whispered. My throat felt tight. "You stole 12 formulas I spent 4 years of my life perfecting. You created a new company behind my back. And now you're telling people I stole ideas from my own team?" Celine started crying, soft, delicate sobs that used to make me want to comfort her. "I didn't want it to happen like this," she said, voice breaking. "We were drowning in debt, Nova. The company was growing so fast and the pressure. It was too much. I thought if we secured the deal first, we could bring you in later. I was scared. We both were. I stared at her. The woman I had trusted with every secret, every fear, every late-night breakdown. The woman I had called my sister. You were scared? I repeated slowly. So you decided to take everything from me instead? Dax reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled away sharply. Come on, Nova. Don't make this ugly, he said gently. This is business. We're still a team. We can restructure things. You'll still have a role, a big one. A role. In my own company. The injustice hit me like a physical blow. I felt completely alone in that moment, even though they were sitting right in front of me. The two people I had loved and supported the most had looked at my life's work and decided it would be better without me. I stood up slowly, legs unsteady. Get out of my office. Nova, Celine started, reaching for me. I said get out. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It was quiet, cold, and shaking with something deeper than anger. As they left, the heavy glass door clicked shut behind them. I sank back into my chair, staring at the empty room. The city lights of Chicago twinkled outside the large windows, indifferent to the wreck my life had just become. That night, I drove to Juno Vale's apartment, my cousin, the only family member who had always seen through people's masks. She was a talented photographer who had documented every milestone of Lumina Skin with her camera. When I told her everything, she didn't offer empty comfort. She simply listened, her eyes steady. You're not crazy, Nova, she said softly. They betrayed you. Now you have to decide what kind of warrior you're going to become. A few days later, I reached out to Elena Voss, my old mentor in the skincare industry. She was a fierce, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s who had built and lost 2 companies of her own. When I showed her the evidence, she didn't look surprised, only sad. I've been where you are, she told me over coffee. The worst part isn't losing the company. It's realizing the people you loved were never really on your side. Their words stayed with me, but so did the pain. A deep, burning sense of injustice that settled heavy in my chest and refused to leave. I had given them everything, my trust, my ideas, my heart. And they had smiled, taken it all and planned my quiet disappearance. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft of the life I had bled for. And for the first time, I began to understand that staying silent would destroy me far more than speaking up ever could. The silence after they left the conference room didn't last long. 48 hours later, everything I had built was taken from me. I received the email at 7:12 a.m. A board meeting had been called without my knowledge. By the time I arrived at the office, it was already over. The new majority shareholders, quietly assembled by Dax and Celine, had voted to remove me as CEO and founder. My name was stripped from the official documents. Lumina Skin now belonged to someone else. Just like that. I stood in the lobby, staring at the sleek branding I had poured my soul into, while security politely asked me to hand over my keycard. My legs felt numb, my mouth tasted like metal. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tell every employee what had really happened, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I walked out into the cold Chicago wind with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. By evening, the storm had begun online. The hashtag #FakeFounderNova started trending. Anonymous posts claimed I had stolen ideas from my own team. Old photos of me were twisted with captions calling me greedy and unstable. Customers who once loved my products began leaving 1-star reviews, saying they no longer trusted the brand. Orders dried up overnight. My bank account, once healthy from years of careful saving, was suddenly drained by emergency legal fees and frozen assets I could no longer access. I watched it all from my dark apartment, curtains drawn, phone glowing in my lap like a cruel spotlight. Night after night, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, knees pulled to my chest. The same couch where Celine and I had laughed over wine while planning our first big launch. The same floor where Dax once danced with me at 2 a.m. when we hit our first 100,000 in sales. Now it felt like a tomb. I kept replaying every moment in my head, every time I had trusted them, every time I had celebrated their successes as if they were my own. The late nights when I shared my most precious formulas because we're family, the way I defended them when others raised concerns. How could I have been so blind? Tears came in waves, ugly, choking sobs that left me gasping for air. I questioned everything: my judgment, my worth, my right to even exist in the beauty industry I had loved so deeply. Some nights I stared at the ceiling and wondered if it would be easier to just disappear, to walk away from skincare forever and never let anyone see how completely I had been broken. One evening, Juno Vale came over unannounced. She let herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. Without saying much, she sat on the floor beside me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. "You don't have to carry this alone, Nova," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the worry beneath it. "This is theft. Clear and simple. We can fight this in court. I'll stand beside you every step." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the exhaustion ran so deep that even hope felt heavy. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Briar Wilder, Dax's older sister. "I just found out what happened. I'm so sorry, Nova. This isn't right. Mom won't say anything. She's too ashamed to speak up. But I needed you to know that not everyone in our family agrees with what he did." I read the message 3 times, then turned my phone face down. Marlene Wilder's silence hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. The woman who had once called me the daughter she never had now chose quiet loyalty to her son over truth. I was completely alone. But somewhere in that suffocating darkness, something began to shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, cold, and strangely clear. I realized I was done protecting them. I was done carrying their shame. I was done shrinking myself so others could feel comfortable with what they had stolen from me. Sitting there in the pitch-black living room, surrounded by the ghosts of my old life, I felt the last piece of the old Nova quietly fall away. The woman who always tried to keep the peace. The woman who believed love and loyalty would always be enough. She was gone. In her place rose something harder, something colder, but also something unbreakable. I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at the glittering Chicago skyline. My reflection stared back at me, eyes swollen, face pale, but steady. I whispered to the empty room, "No more silence." The words felt like a vow. This pain had taken everything from me. Now it was time to decide what I would take back. And for the first time in weeks, beneath all the grief and rage, I felt the faint spark of something dangerous. Resolve. No more silence. Those 3 words echoed in my mind for days until they became something heavier. A decision. I didn't rush to court with cameras flashing. I didn't scream my pain across every headline. Instead, I sat alone in my quiet apartment for one final night, reading through every document, every timestamp, every secret email I had carefully saved. Then, on a cold Thursday morning, I posted the truth. It was a long, raw post on both LinkedIn and Instagram. No dramatic music, no angry captions, just the truth, laid bare. I began with the simple facts. I shared the original research files with their creation dates, timestamps that proved I had developed every one of the 12 formulas years before Eclipse Skin ever existed. I included screenshots of the private emails between Dax and Celine planning the new company while I was still calling them family. I attached the signed distribution contract they had made with Hale and Company behind my back. But I didn't stop at evidence. I wrote about the 6 long years. The nights I fell asleep at my kitchen table with chemical burns on my hands. The mornings I woke up terrified that everything would fail. The way I had celebrated every small win with them, believing we were building something real together. At the end, I wrote the sentence that had been burning inside me for weeks. I am not fighting to take back a company. I am fighting to take back myself. I hit publish, then turned off my phone and went for a long walk along the lake. The wind was sharp against my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid of what would happen next. By the time I returned home that evening, the post had exploded. Thousands of shares, tens of thousands of comments. Women in business, founders, creators, they flooded my inbox with messages of support. Some shared their own stories of betrayal. Others offered help. A few former partners who had quietly watched from the sidelines finally stepped forward with their own evidence. The tide was turning. Elena Voss was one of the first to speak publicly. My mentor posted a powerful statement on her own channels, calling out the industry's silent acceptance of theft and standing firmly beside me. She introduced me to a sharp intellectual property lawyer who specialized in cases exactly like mine. Juno Vale, my loyal cousin, poured her heart into her craft. She created a stunning photo series titled Before and After, black and white images of me in the early days. Exhausted, mixing formulas in my tiny kitchen, contrasted with new portraits of me standing taller, eyes clear and steady. The series went viral within the creative community, turning my pain into something hauntingly beautiful. I watched it all unfold with quiet disbelief. Within 2 weeks, the pressure became too much for them. Celine was quietly removed from her position as COO. The board that had once sided with her began to distance themselves as public opinion shifted. Dax was pushed out of the new project he had tried to build on my stolen work. Investors who had been excited about Eclipse Skin suddenly pulled back, wary of the growing scandal. And slowly, almost painfully, Lumina Skin began to find its way back to its true founder. It wasn't a fairy tale victory. There were still legal battles ahead. There were still nights when doubt crept in and old wounds ached. But for the first time since that night on stage, I felt something warm returning to my chest. Hope. Not the naive hope of before, but something deeper, something earned through fire. I stood in my living room one evening, watching the city lights shimmer on Lake Michigan, and realized the woman staring back at me in the window was no longer broken. She was awakening. This wasn't just about winning back a brand. It was about reclaiming my voice, my power, and my right to exist without apology. And as the momentum continued to build around me, I understood that the quiet strength I had found in the darkest moments was becoming something unstoppable. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone, and I was finally ready to win. Not for revenge, but for the version of myself I refused to let them bury. 3 years had passed since the night I stood in my dark apartment and whispered, "No more silence." And somehow, I was still standing. Not just standing, I was breathing easier, smiling deeper, and building something entirely new. Lumina Reborn. The name came to me one quiet morning while watching the sunrise over Lake Michigan. It wasn't about going back to what was stolen. It was about rising again, cleaner and stronger. The new brand focused on radical transparency. Every formula, every ingredient, every decision made visible to the women who trusted us. No more hidden contracts, no more shadows. We didn't just sell skincare. We sold clarity. I stood backstage at the annual Women in Business Summit, adjusting the microphone on my simple cream blouse. My hands were steady now, though my heart still carried the faint echo of old wounds. Through the curtain, I could hear the soft murmur of the audience, hundreds of women waiting to hear my story. Juno Vale stood beside me, camera slung over her shoulder, squeezing my arm gently. "You've got this," she whispered. "This time, it's your light." Elena Voss, my mentor, and now long-term strategic advisor, gave me a small nod from the side. Her presence had become a quiet anchor, wise, fierce, and unwavering. I stepped onto the stage under warm, golden lights. The applause rose, but it felt different now, softer, more knowing. I looked out at the sea of faces and began to speak, my voice calm and clear. 3 years ago, I lost everything I thought defined me. The company I built from nothing, the people I loved most, even the version of myself I once trusted completely. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But losing everything taught me something I could never have learned any other way. Pain doesn't have to destroy you. It can refine you, if you let it. I shared pieces of the journey, not the raw, bleeding details I once carried alone, but the lessons that had risen from the ashes. I spoke about protecting your ideas, recognizing betrayal disguised as partnership, and building boundaries strong enough to guard your peace. After the talk, I opened the floor for questions. Young women approached me afterward with tears in their eyes, sharing their own fears of being used, manipulated, or erased in their workplaces. I listened. I held their hands. I gave them practical tools and, more importantly, permission to choose themselves. Juno had become my creative partner, turning our story into powerful visual campaigns that inspired thousands. Elena continued to guide the business side with her decades of hard-earned wisdom. Together, we built something real, not just a brand, but a movement. Meanwhile, life had delivered its own quiet justice. Dax and Celine's new venture had collapsed under the weight of broken trust and damaged reputations. Investors walked away. Partnerships dissolved. The pressure of constant financial struggle had worn them down. I heard through mutual connections that they were living modestly now, still tied together more by consequence than choice. One rainy afternoon, a message from Dax appeared on my phone. Nova, I've had a lot of time to think. Therapy helped me see how deeply I failed you. I was trying to be the hero of my own story instead of your partner. I'm truly sorry. I stared at the words for a long time. Part of me waited for the old anger to rise, the old hurt, the old need for him to fully understand what he had broken. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt only a quiet tiredness and a deep sense of freedom. I typed back a short reply. I hope you become the kind of man your future requires you to be. I've already found my peace. Take care. Then I blocked his number. No drama, no long explanations, just closure on my own terms. Because I no longer needed his apology to feel whole. I no longer needed anyone's validation to know my worth. On the final evening of the summit, I stood once more on stage, the lights softer this time, the atmosphere warm and intimate. I looked out at the audience, women of all ages, all backgrounds, and smiled. Not the polished, practiced smile of someone trying to prove something, but a real one, quiet, genuine, hard-earned. I used to think justice meant watching the people who hurt me suffer, I said softly. But real justice, real healing, is standing here today, stronger than before, and using my scars to light the way for others. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with gentle applause that felt like an embrace. As I stepped off the stage, Juno handed me a single white rose. Elena nodded with quiet pride in her eyes. I walked outside into the cool Chicago night, the city lights reflecting on the water like scattered stars. The woman who once sat crying on her apartment floor, doubting her entire existence, had become someone new. Someone who understood that the deepest betrayal could lead to the purest rebirth. Someone who knew that pain, when transformed, becomes purpose. And someone who finally, completely, understood that she deserved every bit of light she had fought so hard to reclaim. This is not just my story. It's a reminder for every woman who has ever been asked to shrink herself so others could shine brighter. You don't have to burn them down to rise. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to stay in the dark. And build a light so strong that no one can ever take it from you again. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you and God bless. Aviso legal, disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies And do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.